everyone, Ariel Adams here with the Superlative podcast. Please listen to our other podcast, aBlogtoWatch Weekly, where we talk about the latest watch news and reviews. Today on Superlative, my guest is Riccardo Dana. He is the founder and CEO of SWOP, that's SWOP. Riccardo, welcome.
Thank you so much, Ariel. Pleasure to be here. Super excited to talk more about everything and the watch world.
Yeah, thank you. So your business, just so people know, SWOP, it's SWOP.trade, and it's a platform. You've built an online platform for watch enthusiasts. We'll talk a little bit about what that does, but what is your basic elevator pitch? In just a couple sentences, how do you describe what SWOP is?
Yeah, absolutely. So we built kind of a all-in-one platform for collectors and dealers to get in to be able to automate the whole process from selling, sourcing, negotiating, handling, buying, and collecting. And we provide all the data points that are lacking in traditional marketplaces and making it in a way that is more transparent, more seamless, more efficient, and more intelligent through the use of AI.
What kind of data is not normally available that you are now presenting people with?
The data around trust, the data around elements that a lot of marketplaces hide simply because of the lack of wanting to share their commission or things like this, where we want to be a lot more open. We want to be able to share what people have, what people own, what people are looking for, without having to play this game of, let me see if I have it in my inventory, let me get back to you next day, or so on and so forth, to try and budge in the price and things like this. We provide as well the true market data. So when someone does also make an offer, we can also give them a guidance on what the market is telling you by saying, hey, look, maybe you're a bit too high, you're offering a bit too high. Try to go more into the market and test it out, so that instead of focusing on trying to maximize our commission, we're trying to maximize the sale so that both parties, both ends are happy and are more closer to a true market element of it.
I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about the context. And what I mean by that is why you felt something like this was necessary. Certain people listening to the show are very familiar with buying and selling watches, and they perhaps know exactly what you're talking about. But I think a lot of people may not understand the context, like why is all this stuff necessary and sort of what existed before that. So maybe describe a little bit, as you were investigating building something like this, what did you learn about from the current market and watch sales and buying landscape? What made you feel that these additional things were necessary? Describe a little bit about what the other part of the watch buying world is like that is not SWOP.
Yeah, absolutely. So before SWOP was and became SWOP, we spoke to a lot of buyers, a lot of collectors, and a lot of dealers. To be exact, we spoke to over 250 dealers and hundreds of collectors, high-end collectors with beautiful watch collections. And what we saw is that there was a gap in between where it was very both ends, but both sides really should come together into one that is a lot more fluid and a lot more again, that transparent world. And what I saw is that there was a lot of frustration when it came to pricing, when it came to handling the negotiations. Dealers were getting lowball offers left and right by people that were sometimes trying to to get the lowball offers, even if it was an instant rejection. But they always have to be behind it and always try to say, hey, look, this is the price. And then a lot of new buyers as well, new collectors, just had no clue. They were passionate about the world of watches, but they didn't understand how everything worked. They just bought it because they felt like it was a nice watch, and that's completely fine. And why we decided to bring that intelligence element was to be able to provide data onto the format of a human reasoning layer. And that is giving them that guidance, just like a normal traditional broker would. They'll help you and say like, look, hey, this is what it's worth. This is what it is. And we can give that to both ends when it comes to selling and when it comes to buying, but also when it comes to trading. In the watch world, as many of you know, people do a lot of bartering and a lot of trading one watch for another watch. I mean, in our platform, we did some fantastic trades from vintage watches to more modern ones. There's no infrastructure behind to support this. So everything goes into a world that is more now on the gray, WhatsApp, things like this, where there's no safety, no escrow, and you have to deal with people that you don't trust. Even if they are trustworthy, there's that gap layer because you don't know them. And what we're trying to do with SWOP is bridge that trust layer by providing them the infrastructure, the tools, connecting them with other trusted dealers, other trusted collectors, give them a degree of layer of first, second degree, or third degree of connectivity, so that if a friend knows a friend that has this specific watch, we can link both of them. And we know that the in-between party is both of a friend from both sides that we trust and that we can get back to. So just like in LinkedIn, you have degrees of connections. We do the same thing of degrees of connection, but for assets. And that's how our AI can find who owns what, because you would have told us who has what and who wants what on a 6-degree layer. So there's privacy, of course. But if you want to be more public and want to find things that may be not accessible to the public market, that dealers may not have or collectors are hiding, we can find that out for you in a way that is permitted, legal, without breaching any data infringement, but in a way that is accessible to anyone, even a first starter with his first watch. If he wants to drop $50,000 on a watch, we'll be able to guide him in the right way without overpaying or underpaying, and so on and so forth.
Thank you for all that. I want to explain some further context to the listeners. I think it's important. Let's go back prior to buying watches on the internet. It was a pretty clear process. You as a buyer, you saw the watch. You could examine it. You could look the dealer in the eye. A lot of the deception that may be able to be possible through a remote transaction really wasn't. The buyer knew exactly what they were getting. Maybe they weren't a watchmaker, but they could look at condition. And it was relatively safe to buy watches in person because a lot of the concerns were sort of removed. Move that to the internet, and you have a lot more convenience. You have a lot more options. A lot more people can buy, a lot more people can sell. But there's also the potential for a lot of fraud, as well as just people not doing things that the buyer or the seller want to feel comfortable in such a high, ticket price transaction. So what you've had over the years, and the funny thing is people started buying watches on the internet almost immediately when there was the consumer internet. So you have like 30 years or more of experience of people buying and selling and trading and doing all different types of things online with watches. I've definitely been burned before. Thankfully, it wasn't too much, but early on, I tried to buy something from someone on a forum. And it was full on fraud. It wasn't even a mistake. It was just like, I don't even actually have this watch. And it was amazing to me because it was not an expensive item, right? This is not even in the thousands. But early on, I experienced some of the problems that could occur. And flash forward to today, I've written about this in a lot of contexts. I said that the watch market is too fragmented. What I meant by that is just simply too many ways to buy a watch or to sell a watch. It's very confusing. Consumers are prone to do nothing because they're afraid of making the wrong decision. And at the same time, when it comes to prices, your typical consumer wants to find the best price. Typically, it isn't that they want to buy a specific watch from a specific dealer. They don't care who they buy from. They want the best price for the best quality, especially if they're buying something used. And I think what you're trying to do with SWOP, and what I think some others are trying to do, is trying to make that process safer and more convenient, but also to increase the volume, to make it so that more of these transactions are happening. And it gets complicated because there's a lot of different concerns to take in. A lot of people just want systems that work, and they're just trying to be fast. Sometimes you have to build in certain types of protections because there is this incentive for fraud. And as you said correctly, dealers do not want to be as transparent as the client wants them to be. There's this core conflict, and there's really no way of getting around it except building in safeguards, where the person selling the watch wants to say as little about it as possible, show as few images about as possible, and lead the buyer to believe maybe it's in the perfect condition that I want for this price. The buyer wants protections. The buyer wants to say, if I feel deceived or something about this transaction felt off, I want to cancel it. I want to reverse it. I want to have some protections. And normally that's not available because these are, there's no refunds, or the buyers just disappeared. You don't know how to reach them. I've heard so many stories over the years, probably more than most given my position, but this is a very real and ongoing issue. And while it's unclear exactly how to fix all of it, a platform like SWOP is a good attempt to fix multiple problems at the same time. What would you add to that?
No, absolutely. And we saw as well exactly on forums, after the forums came, because of that lack of infrastructure, we saw Chrono24 come. But then Chrono24 fell into the same trap of the lack of data, the lack of support, and remembering the roots of why we needed a system. And they stopped innovating. They stopped adding things, and they just stayed stale as just a simple marketplace.
Let me explain something there. I think is very, very interesting. You mentioned that Chrono24 kind of stopped doing certain things, and they're not the only one. Here's what happens. I'm not trying to overgeneralize, but I think this is very, very interesting. When a platform is too friendly to the buyer, meaning there's a lot of transparency, a lot of safeguards, a lot of protections, the sellers feel threatened and go away. When a platform is too safe for sellers, meaning they have a wide variety of things they can or can't say, they can get away with a lot. Maybe the buyers feel concerned about it. So every platform is kind of this uncomfortable balance between being good enough for the buyer and good enough for the seller, but inherently compromises the experience from both, because the other side wants things that the other side doesn't want to have. There's a built-in conflict of interest. I'm not saying that other platforms for other products don't have the same issue, but I think it's particularly acute with watches, where making both parties happy, buyer and seller, at the same time with the same tool, just seems to be that much more difficult to do. It's really hard, isn't it?
Absolutely. And each of these marketplaces, when you look at it, they are closed off. They act as dealers themselves. They don't want to start sharing with other marketplaces. You know, you've got fantastic marketplaces out there like Bezel as well, or Whistler in Europe. But all of them are so scared to share that data, scared to open up to different things. And what we're trying to do is bridge them together, bridge the dealers on each of those marketplaces so that they can cross-list on eBay, Facebook Marketplace, Chrono24, Bezel, and so on, handle all of those negotiations at once with this intelligent layer behind it so that they can continue to flourish. We're not trying to destroy them. We want to use them to survive and grow, and to give our collectors and our dealers the maximum exposure and the chances to sell, but by providing them that data and that intelligence infrastructure behind to support the sales, to bring them that transparency, that knowledge, and that understanding of automating the whole process, and so on and so forth. So yeah, that's one thing that we want to do with SWOP, and what we're building is bridging those connections between everyone, partnering with them, accessing everyone, remembering that the world of watches is very heavy around collectors and dealers that work hand in hand, because most dealers usually get access to the best pieces because they work for it, and so on and so forth. And those collectors go to them. So they build those relationships. But sometimes if you don't have access to this, you can't get that relationship. And relationships can be broken very quickly, and they're hard to create. And what we are trying to do with SWOP is be able to bridge those relationships, not just for one group of person, but anyone who has the means, anyone who wants and that can do it. And that's what we built in the platform. And it's something called The Grid, which connects all the dealers on Katawiki, eBay, Chrono24, Bezel, and so on. But also your own network of individuals, so that you can see who has what, who owns what, who wants what, so that you can trade, buy within that cluster of your own community. So really it'll become one giant liquidity pool of community between buyers, dealers, and marketplaces, all into one, in a way that is smooth. We still abide by the Bezel rules and so on and so forth. So they have their escrow service. The SWOP marketplace also has our own escrow service. We always try to guarantee safety from both ends so that both parties are safe and secure.
I want to bring up a particular scenario, and I want you to tell me how you or the platform deals with the scenario. And I see this enough that I think it's an interesting issue. The scenario is essentially this. Somebody puts a watch up for sale, not a new watch, or at least they're not a dealer or an authorized dealer. This is what you call a used or gray market watch. And what they do is they engage what I call ambitious pricing, or aspirational pricing for that matter. They're pricing this watch at a high amount, not because that's the market value, not because that's what it costs them, but because they're fishing. They're wondering if someone is foolish enough to think that it's worth it and get it. I see this a lot. I don't know how much of an issue it is today versus a year ago, but I suspect that there's still a lot of this going on.
100%.
On a basic level, anybody can publish any price they want for anything online. You can go on eBay or any of these platforms, and a watch that everyone else is selling for $1,000, you can say I want $1 million for it. Nothing's going to stop you. But the hope, I think, from some of these dealers is that consumers trust published prices, see this and think, oh, what is it that this dealer knows that I don't know? Maybe it's worth that. So I see this as a form of deception, at worst a form of fraud. How does the SWOP platform deal with this scenario?
Absolutely. So it's quite simply, exactly. So they'll have their listed price. And what we provide to everyone else is the actual market price and the ones that have been sold in the market and a price history. This is nothing new. I mean, every watch does this. They have a fantastic data pool of historical pricing, Bezel as well. And Chrono24 does that to some extent. We'll always have people always up pricing everything because they try to make as much money as they can. And realistically, when you look at the price, are we wrong to say that his price is wrong and not the right one? Because maybe in 5 years it will become this. Maybe no one's listing it. A price will always fluctuate up and down. If you look at the Cartiers as well and the FP Journes that have been selling for crazy prices at auctions with Philips and Sotheby's recently, people will buy what they believe it's worth. It's kind of like art. Art has the sentimental value beyond the artisanal manufacturing element. Yes, it does cost a certain price to make a watch. Yes, depending on how rare it is, the price will be different because there's less and maybe there's more demand for it. So you can always juggle the price beyond what it was traditionally priced at. So we'll always advise the people, but we'll never say, oh, our price is the truest price. Because if someone does end up buying it at that price, whether it is wrong or not is debatable. Maybe that person who bought it says, yeah, I would have spent $1 million worth more if it means that much to him. If you take it, for example, my grandfather's watch, its market price is worth maybe $4,000. But if I was to lose it and then I see it, someone selling it and it's that watch, I would pay 25 or 50,000 just to get it back because of that sentimental value. So we provide them the data of what's happening everywhere on the internet, but the pricing will always be to the right of the buyer and the seller. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. I mean, there's no one solution for it. I just think it's an interesting issue because I actually take issue with the notion of market price. Mm-hmm. I think this is a concept that dealers made up to advance their own interests. And I think a lot of it has to do with these issues of what I call exceptional situations. And so I don't think that all past purchases or transaction history should be weighed equally. I'll give you an example. Somebody buying something via sort of a transparent arm's length transaction, like an auction on eBay or Chrono24, a platform like that, means that both the buyer and seller were sort of like equally powered. There was a choice in the transaction. I think it has a little bit potentially more utility to look at it as larger sentiment. Contrastly, you said that there's certain individuals who buy for emotional reasons because one person somewhere bought something for $50,000 that would have gladly been sold at $20,000 for a profit, for me should not move the market price. Similarly, auction houses. And I've written about this a lot for a long time now. I think starting in 2012, I started writing heavily about this. Auction houses are not transparent. You really don't know what's happening behind the scenes. The bidders themselves, the buyers, are anonymous. They often work through proxies, and at the end of the day, you don't know who they are. You don't know other circumstances going on. Because these are published prices, a lot of people want to inflate auction values. So maybe the seller is giving the buyer something secret on the side to bid so high. So you have this situation where auctions attempt to inflate the value of things because of what I call exceptional or sometimes dubious situations. And therefore, if you're trying to understand what the average person out there would buy or sell something for, some of these data points, again, in my opinion, are of much lower quality or reliability than other data points. How do you handle that in your system when not all numbers should be created equally or should be treated equally?
Absolutely. So again, this goes back to my point where we only advise on it. One thing that I know, and I completely agree with you, is how auction prices do fluctuate. I mean, not just for watches, but for anything. I've seen one watch that I've been bidding for the past 3 months, and every time it expires, I get outbidded. We met the reserve price, but then it gets listed back again for auction literally just a few days later. So I know that there's someone behind that is part of them that always tries to increase the price for me to hit my highest point to go like, okay, let's get it more. But
we'll call that playing games.
Yeah, exactly. And it's that playing game that I wanted to remove from everywhere, you know, and I don't want to discriminate dealers themselves, but they do a lot of the games as well.
I mean, this is look, I don't want to use the word fraud necessarily because it's a loaded word. It's a violation of the law.
We can say it's unfair.
These are unfair business practices going on.
Absolutely. So what we try to do is, again, when it comes to purchasing the watch, or even when it comes to selling the watch, when they go and put their pricing, we'll just say like, look, you're quite far off the market price. This is what we believe it is, and so on and so forth. Same thing with, again, when they go to purchase the price, the user will see like, look, he's way above market price. You know, if you want to buy it, sure, but this is what we saw on our side. These are other recent purchases and things like this. We're not ever going to say like, no, don't buy it at that price. We're just going to give them that knowledge that sometimes a lot of the time they don't have. And it might go like, oh, wait, okay, I didn't know that, you know, because it's very easy to trick someone into buying something, especially when it's a watch. You know, a watch, you have all these emotions that come to it when it comes to buying. And before you buy it, unless you have a little devil's advocate behind you, you might make an impulse purchase and then regret it later. And then, you know, it might make you despite the markets itself. And we don't want that. We want to be able to make them conscious of what they're doing, understand both sides of the market, the true market, or per se the market that has been sold and so on and so forth, and the market that is in Chrono 24 and other marketplaces where the prices are really, you know, 20% above or more. So we give them that knowledge, we give them that advisory behind that is unbiased. And that's probably the most important thing, is our AI is really unbiased. It doesn't take just the side of the buyer, but also the seller, but also the whole industry itself. We want to help both sides make a sale. But if we believe there's something really fishy going on, we would all kind of always say like, no, don't go ahead with it. You're being screwed over in a nice way, you know?
There's a philosophical question I want to ask you, and it's maybe not easy to answer, but I think it really relates to what you're talking about. There's 4 stakeholders that you sort of mentioned. One is the buyer, 2 is the seller, 3 is the industry, and 4 is your business swap. When juggling those various interests, how do you determine priority? Because as I said, certain other platforms say, we're all about the seller. We want people to list. Others are like, no, we want to make sure that buyers can get the best price. Others say, no, we want to have the most high integrity platform to protect the industry. And then others say, well, we're a business. We want to promote our interests and make money or sell our company or increase our equity value or whatnot. When having to balance those factors, who do you feel that you are ultimately working for at the end of the day, given those 4 different types of stakeholders?
So regarding that, what we're trying to ensure that we don't actually prioritize is probably our business financial. Thankfully, we don't have investors to say, no, you need to make money, you need to make money. So we don't have to push for the wrong things just for us to make money. And why we do this is because, as I said, you know, I'm a watch passionist. My father was a watchmaker as well. I have a lot of friends in the industry, and I have a lot of friends who are collectors. So I'm always trying to look at all the sides, from the watchmakers themselves, the ones that are up and coming, to the sellers and to the buyers and so on and so forth. We actually are very happy if we go and make a sale on these other marketplaces. In fact, when you use our platform and say like, hey, look, I'm looking for this or this watch, we're going to go and actually negotiate those watches on those marketplaces on your behalf. If it sells, we don't touch a single commission. You would have either paid us your $25 a month, or you were on the free plan. And we're happy. We made you what you needed to do. But those platforms do take. Now, of course, if it does sell on us, we do charge a commission. But a lot of the times for dealers, we actually promote selling through their WhatsApp, through their own platforms, through other marketplaces, just because we also believe sometimes they can get a better price. Right now, our fees are vary between 5 and 6%. And we believe that's very high. Maybe to Chrono24 and other marketplaces, that's very low. But we try to always make it as low as possible to make sure that both worlds can benefit from it. So realistically, we want to promote all three combined. So the industry, the sellers, and the buyers, but in a way where it's not egocentric. And it's really hard to find the word that can really represent this, but finding a place or almost like a decentralized / centralized pool to be able to go and share what it is that you have, what it is that you're looking for, and people help each other. So a very friendly community that tries to remove all the scammers, all the bad players, all of the missed data points, and remove all of this game and this horrible part of the industry, and bring in something where originally watch was created for, which is remembering what a watch stands for. What was the point of it? Not the arrogance of, let me just buy to show it off and things like this, which is fine. You know, there's always going to be a thing, but the true purpose of watches and why so many collectors love it is because of what they represent, because of what they do, the artisanal structure and building of it, the complications and the movements. And that's why we're still wearing these beautiful pieces instead of an Apple Watch, because they all tell the time. In fact, Apple Watch tells the time much better and more accurately, but we like it because of what it is and how it makes us feel. So we want to keep that lit, and we want to make sure that is in a place that is safe, transparent again, by prioritizing literally all three sectors equally, ensuring that the dealers are protected, the buyers are also protected, but also the industry is welcomed, meaning new brands, retailers as well, that can come all into one cluster of platform.
It's absolutely great to know that the person behind the platform is a watch lover themselves. I think that should be the first barrier to entry. If you build a platform, a tool like this for watch lovers, you don't like watches, you're in the wrong space.
I agree.
I want to talk about commissions and percentages and things like that. What I've noticed is that many dealers choose the platforms not necessarily based upon how many people it reaches, but how cheap the transaction costs for them. Certain platforms have a reputation of dealers trying to go around them. Other platforms start with low transaction fees and percentages and go up. My question is, why is a percentage even necessary? I understand why a platform would like that, but is a flat fee for a transaction not a little bit better for volume? Because does that not stimulate more transactions if people have a smaller predictable amount rather than a percentage of the value of the watch, which to me has never made any sense? Again, I understand that that's common out there. Maybe you feel like you're leaving money on the table, but isn't it correct to say that the most competitive way of going about this is abandoning the percentage commission altogether?
Yeah, that would be very nice, to be fair. All the marketplaces that are bigger right now can do this, but they choose not to because of the reasons I've mentioned. The investors behind are kind of forcing them part of the industry. The reason why we are charging and where the transparency comes is because it's just for us to avoid making a loss. So if they go through our escrow service, which is why we're very happy still if we manage to sell it on their platforms. Again, we tell them, look, we're happy for you to do it on WhatsApp. Use our tool for WhatsApp to handle those negotiations, or on your website where you don't have to pay a commission. The reason why they go through us, and if they want to, is if they want the escrow service. The escrow and the payments sides, this costs us. We don't have the capabilities right now to have our own escrow model. The licensing behind is expensive. So we get charged around 3.5% just from any, based on the volume of that transaction. So this already is 3.5. Then we add an additional 1.5 to 2% in transaction fees, which adds up to about 4.5 to 5%. So on sometimes we even make a loss. The only time where we really make 1%, which is just the ability for us to grow and scale and reinvest back into the business, is if it's an actual private dealer that does it. Because when it's actual business dealers, we charge 5%, so it's at cost. And then we make we make about 1% on that from private dealers and collectors if they sell on it. But one thing that I wanted to add, sorry, I know I'm blabbering a lot. We actually are reinvesting that to club members too. So we have a fantastic feature called clubs on our grid, which allows for community members to create their own club, but also benefit from the transactions of their own community. So I'm part of fantastic watch clubs across Dubai, New York, and Geneva and London. And there is hundreds of thousands of dollars of transactions within club community members. These transactions, a lot of these club owners have no means of being able to benefit from this. Yet they brought that trust that they built between those community members with each other, transacting in a way that is free from scams and so on and so forth, but they don't even get to reap the reward from it. So what we're actually doing is we're giving them that 1% that we would benefit from it and giving it to them. So they get to earn from every transaction that their club community members do. So that's, again, one way that we're giving it back to the community to prove to showcase that, look, for us, it's more about you guys building those communities that are thriving and so on and so forth in a way that is safe and being able to benefit from your hard work, from putting those people together, just like you would with any finder's fee. So, yeah.
I find the battle of fees and the sort of struggle to have the cheapest possible transaction to be interesting. Watches, I think, are difficult to understand because people look at it and like, oh, it's expensive. So people who are buyers or sellers are going to be accustomed to expensive services. But the reality is quite different. Because they're expensive and because margins can often be quite thin, people are looking to cut costs in the transaction as much as possible, which I find very, very interesting. So these dealers, the people that end up owning these watches or sold, do not typically make a lot of money per transaction. So what they try to do is they try to find all these little ways of reducing the cost of the transaction so that they can benefit from the sale. And they reduce that cost in lots of ways. I mean, the idea that someone is managing a WhatsApp group versus just advertising the internet is interesting. Advertising makes more sense because the advertising does the work for you. Whereas when you're actively managing it, you spend less, but these individuals like 24/7 are constantly managing their WhatsApp groups, their little forum areas, their Facebook community, whatever it is. They put in my opinion, as much time or effort in that management as they might in sort of marketing fees. So you have this very interesting context where it's very much a low margin situation for certain players, even though you can compare it against, a Rolex store, an authorized dealer buying directly from the brand who is getting comparatively a high margin. And so it's, I think, very interesting to look strictly at the economics of the space. Because if you just look at watch buying and selling from a distance, it all looks the same. Once you look at it on a micro level, you realize, oh my God, these transactions are so different. These parties are so different. The economics are so different. The safety protocols and standards are so different. I admire you for trying to have one platform to do it all. But as I think we're getting at in the conversation, there's a lot of different microeconomies based within the larger macro world of watches on the internet.
Absolutely. And one thing to add on that, I mean, when you look at the different markets in how a watch is sold in New York, for example, or in Tokyo, or in Hong Kong, or in Geneva, or in Dubai, everyone will have a different process, their own economy, and their own pricing structure. And some areas are actually more transparent than others, especially if you go to Tokyo, that's why now Tokyo itself is becoming such a big and has always been a big hub of transparency, authenticity as well. And a lot of people are literally just flying in to Japan and Tokyo to buy their watches.
It's wild. It's really wild.
And it makes sense because from the fees that you can benefit from it, it'll cost you the same amount as a flight to travel from the US to there. So you get to visit a new country and buy an amazing watch on that side and do the same as if you were to buy it in where you are based. So yeah, I completely agree with your points of those macro and micro economies being at scales and being vastly different.
How do you juggle on a weekly or monthly basis which of those micro economies that you're focused on? Because I recognize no one tool can work for everyone seamlessly. You have to sort of pick and choose different communities to prioritize. How do you choose which communities to prioritize? What I mean by that is you could spend a whole couple of months working just to make it a better platform for people listing. And then you might say, oh, I have to add all these features for people to actually, browse and for buyers. And then people in one country have one issue. People who sell vintage watches have one issue. People that sell newer watches have another issue. So as you can see, and as you of course know, there's not you don't just work on the platform. You have to choose which part of the platform or for which audience you're working for. And I'm curious about how you make those priority decisions.
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing for sure that I can tell you where we kind of deprioritized is the world of vintage. Vintage is very hard because there's an additional layer because of how old they are. There's been at some point authenticity issues, movement changes.
Just say it's Fraud City.
Yeah, so you come to an area that is a lot harder to transact. And people also know that. And we don't want to touch yet because, again, we want to be able to provide and ensure, say, look, we can guarantee you that safety. And if it's not, we have that process behind it. And I love vintage watches. So if it was up to me, I would have focused on vintage watches. But the market itself and where the biggest drive for transactions and needs is more on modern. So we do focus on modern ones that are the traditional watches that you see, the big 10 from IWC, Rolex, Patek, AP, Breitling, Hublot, Cartier, and so on and so forth. But we really focus on, I would say the area that we focus on the most is ensuring that we have our pieces in every little pockets and people's pockets. So third parties, we're working with insurance companies. Wax Insurance is a fantastic provider of insurance for watches and jewelry. We're working as well. We're looking to work with Vaultic to be able to provide authenticity as well. We're working with Chrono Street in Dubai, where you can go and verify and authenticate all these things. So the way that we prioritize is the flow of the transaction. That is ensuring that everything is fluid. And once we do have at that place and we're comfortable with it, that's when we start working on, okay, what is it that we're missing from the buyer side? What is it that we're missing from the dealer side? And these could be little things such as VAT, being compliant with the tax regulations, with who to sell, being compliant with the insurance of the shipments and so on and so forth. So there's so much more that goes beyond just buying and selling, especially when it's online. And we just want to make sure that we take it step by step by ensuring that first the transaction is done, and then the overhead layer and the underneath layer, which is the AI that we built, comes on top to be able to build and to be able to support those transactions and enhance them, from finding leads to automating the messages and negotiations to listing it for you and so on and so forth. So yeah, priority is transaction and then third parties, authentication, support, so that everyone has access to everything that they need into one consolidated platform. And then the AI that is underneath, that also covers the top layer of the funnel.
Movado introduces the Heritage Kingmatic, a sleek timepiece that brings back the golden age of 20th century mechanical wristwatches when design and distinction were everything. The original Kingmatic was debuted in 1952 as a self-winding dress watch that remained in the Movado catalog for nearly 3 decades. The modern Heritage Kingmatic is directly inspired by a cushion-shaped Kingmatic design from 1962. Movado offers multiple cosmetic styles of the Heritage Kingmatic, each with a 35mm wide steel case, legible dial with beautiful Dauphine-style hands, and a Swiss-made automatic movement assembled at the company's manufacture in La Chaux-de-Fonds. Movado invites you to discover the Heritage Timepiece collection today as the company celebrates both the 70th anniversary of the original Kingmatic as well as the 145th anniversary of the historic Movado brand. Discover your next timepiece at movado.com. I want to talk a little bit more AI, but before that, I want to discuss basically the network effect and how that influences the watch market and specific product popularity. I've noticed this a lot, and what I'm really talking about is the tendency for certain brands and certain models to always be popular and everything else to sort of be a sort of second category tier. The internet and the way a lot of search engines and technology works tends to prioritize lists And human beings like to look at the top things on lists. So you have this strange situation where the combination of human nature and technology has created this idea that there are top watches you want. It's not really true, but there is a real tendency for there to be a small number of brands, Rolex being among them, and a small number of models overall that tend to be popular all the time. The problem is that as a result of this network effect, a small number of watches tend to be in high demand and have high prices. And then everything else seems like an outlier where it doesn't match that type of desire, even though those watches are perfectly fine. I think that there's a lot of problems behind this network effect. I think that it consolidates too much attention to too few watches. I think that the joy of wearing a watch is having something distinctive, meaning you don't have a watch that someone else in the room also has. Yet the network effect explicitly promotes the idea that everyone should be into the same things. So you're familiar with the network effect. I'm curious to know what else you would add to it, but more specifically, how do you advise that your platform or in general consumers be wary of this and to avoid some of the problems of there being too much interest around too few products?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, look, that the simple answer to why that is, as I'm sure you know, it's because of this concept of the holy grail of watches, the top big threes. But then because of how old they were able to... But
it's a fantasy. It's a total fantasy.
And they were able to sell this marketing idea. It's kind of like diamonds with... Diamonds Are Forever, the marketing plot. And they were able to really sell you this dream that this is who the people are buying it through influencers, through sports individuals, Roger Federer representing Rolex, Formula One drivers as well, Rolex, and so on and so forth. So this fantasy that you're talking about as well was really monopolized through marketing. So the issue with this is that everyone kind of goes through the basics because it's this safe module. They have a high resale in case you need to resell. There's always going to be demand for it. And that's okay. And there should be for this. But you then ignore all of these other beautiful independent watchmakers that are either just as old or less known, but that go into a sector that is just more insane. I mean, if you look at, these are the high independent watchmakers, but MB&F, FB Journe, Grebel Forcé, Debutine, Your Work, HYT, these are such fantastic ones. And these are the more among the popular ones, even Rex Recepi, I always pronounce his name wrong, because of the price points and now being brought up more to the light. People are like, oh my God, this is so cool. The complications behind it are so crazy. It goes into something that is so less traditional because they're able to innovate a bit more and people finally find it. They step away from, call it the matrix of the watch world. But there's just so many pieces from HR Moser, Kudoke in Japan and all that, Baltic as well, that just launched one recently and did so well with Space One. There's so much out there that people forget because they're so promoted on marketplaces. If you go on old Chrono 24 or Bezel or Whistler, what do you see? Rolex, AP, Patek, and things like this. What we do on the other side is if you tell us, hey, look, what is your budget? What is it that you like? Do you like things that are more traditional? We try to understand the emotional aspects. And when you ask us for a watch, we'll then be able to properly advise you and say like, look, this feels like it sounds more of this. This could fit well with who you are as a person and things like this, because pieces have emotional factor again behind it. Some are worn more for classy events. Some are worn for more sporting or outdoors events. And what we do is that instead of trying to sell just to sell you, again, we're here behind to promote not just the big brands, but we also welcome independent watchmakers at the retail level and say like, look, give us your data, tell us more about those watches so that we can then tell people when they say like, hey, what's an unknown independent watch in Poland? And we could be able to provide them, hey, this and these are who we know, these are their watches, this is their price points, and so on and so forth, so that we can advise in a non-biased way, and so on and so forth, so that we bring the whole community of watch and the industry again back up and not always foreseen for the big three and all the bigger players that have that marketing budget to spend to sell us that dream, which fair enough. I do love Rolex. I do love Vacheron Constantin. I think they're fantastic pieces, but there's this whole world that people forget, especially newcomers of independent watchmakers that have just as much, if not more insane quality build but don't have the same visibility, you know? So
I want to talk about this idea that you say selling the dream. And I think this is very important. It's a generational difference, really. And the larger category is the must-have watches or brands. When I got into watches, this was not a concept. There was no watches you needed to have. There was no brands you needed to have. The idea was that you learned about yourself. You learned what you could afford, what you liked, what fit on your wrist, what colors and materials you like. And then you would make a lot of independent choices about what you wanted to buy, really just based upon your own specific, tastes. But now, especially with social media, I don't quite understand it. There's this culture of this is what you're supposed to have. This is what you should be into. And on top of that, there's this whole bundle of expectations. I don't really understand all of them. These expectations are girls will find you irresistible. Men will think you have money. Your watch will go up in value. This is the most classic watch on the planet. Every time you look at it, your heart will beat faster. It's so beautiful. Like a bunch of honestly like dumb, childish things that are obviously wrong, but it seems to be such a core inherent part. I guess my question is, because again, we have a generational difference here. Where are these messages coming from? And what do they serve? Why is it that a nice watch that makes you feel good is not good enough? Why do all these expectations that are completely BS in some instances have to be included to get people excited about the category?
Yeah, no, that makes complete sense. So I'll speak on my generation. So I'm 27. So I feel like I can speak freely for that cluster of age. But heavily, it's the main cause of this is the toxicity of social media, how we're perceived, how exactly like you said, women, men perceive us based on our success, based on our wealth, based on who we are, and so on and so forth. And it goes the same way as a car. You know, if you drive a fancy car, automatically people want to hang out with you. They want to be with you. But of course, even before social media, I know that when you had a nice car, people still had that emotional feeling because it made you feel something. But it was less broad, less exposed to the rest of the world and so on and so forth. So for the social media really brought light in a positive way as well, but also a negative way, because it brought all of that arrogance, all of that ego of, hey, my net worth might be 40K and that whole 40K is in a Patek. Yet I know someone who's worth 3.5 billion, and that's a true story, 3.5 billion, and he has the same watch as me, which is a Swatch Blancpain collab, and it's worth less than 500 euros. Yet that's his daily watch. And you wouldn't think he's a billionaire, yet he would outdo any guys wearing their $100,000 Richard Mille Plus watch and so on and so forth. So really, I think the true devil of this is the exposure of being able to showcase what it is that we own in a way that is negative, because you have two sides. You've got the collector side where they showcase not for the arrogance and not for the ego, but for the pleasure of the collecting side, of the beauty of the watch, which I believe that is correct. I love when people show their watches because they are so passionate about the watch itself, not because, oh, I'm rich and I was able to afford that. Whereas after you have that other side from Americans, people in Dubai, Europe as well, they love to show off their pieces, not because of the timepiece itself and what it is, but for the messaging, the follow, for people say like, oh, you're so cool, or wow, this guy must be so rich, and so on and so forth. So that's where the segregation comes. There's one good side, and it's the collecting side, the appreciation of the piece itself, rather than what it shows and tells people what you own. Because realistically, a lot of these watches, I mean, a lot of the time, they're not worth a lot at the core structure of to make it. There's a whole branding behind that upscales and the manufacturing behind that upscales the value. But if you took the pieces and removed, the only pieces that is worth is if it's material like gold, that is its core value per se. So yeah, that's my belief on why people are like that.
No, it's a great explanation, and obviously there's a lot more that can be discussed about it. I think the reason I bring it up is because what I know is that for people to stick with the watch hobby, they have to personally enjoy it. And what I notice a lot is people buy an expensive watch because they believe that there'll be some type of social value for them. And when that value isn't there, when that watch doesn't make them feel super confident and people don't notice it, my fear is that they abandon the hobby. So what ends up happening is like new people, young people who are probably going to be exposed through social media more so than maybe having a friend or a family member who's like a hyper watch collector and gets them exposed to their social media is going to be a typical vector. They now have this hurdle, like a mountain, right? They have to see the bullshit mountain, sorry, so to say, and then have to climb it and then get to the other side. Not everyone will climb it. Not everyone will go to the other side, but they have to experience the world of showing off before they recognize this is not really a hobby about that. This is a hobby about rewarding myself. The validation is great, but ultimately, as you'll learn, or maybe you already know, superficial validation doesn't last for very long. People need to like you for your actual choices as opposed to the costume that you're wearing. So that's why I think this is such an important topic, because for people to be a watch collector for decades, they need to buy watches that make them happy. And that's not just the watch itself. That's also the process, the price, maybe the ability to get rid of it afterwards. That all goes into it. So as someone who's concerned about the health of the hobby, I see this as all being an integrated discussion, allowing people to enjoy the hobby while they're following it, enjoy the hobby while they're buying something, enjoy the hobby while they're wearing a watch, and then enjoying a hobby while they're talking about it with others. And use the word toxicity, which I think is important. In the watch collector space today, you have all of the above. You have very toxic environments, very healthy environments. And the sad thing is that it's all mixed up. It's all so chaotic that as a novice, you have to sort of like see this like kind of like ugly street market that's like dirty and smelly before you recognize, where the nice areas are for you. And maybe it's always been that way with the hobby, and I'm being somewhat nostalgic, but it seems to be that without help or a little bit of determination, a lot of people could get out of the hobby as quickly as they get into it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And one thing I know for sure, and that I didn't actually add, my passion came again from my history with my father, and my grandfather that have been collecting themselves from stopwatches to watches themselves to creating watches. So since a young kid, I received a flick flack and before a swash. And then I received something a bit nicer for every achievement. When I did my first communion, when I graduated, I received as well another watch. So all of these steps were stepping boundaries that were an accomplishment. And the people that were not fortunate enough like me to be able to have a father to share that upon them, they have to find it for themselves. And they have that choice of, exactly like you said, finding it for your own personal rewards, saying like, okay, I just got a bonus. I love this watch. I'm happy to go and spend on it because I want it. I feel proud of being able to spend it rather than I want to spend it to go and show it off, because exactly like you said, if it doesn't bring them that that external value that they were looking for, they're going to be like, oh, well, this is not worth what I paid for it, So that's where we're trying to, bridge that and provide them that knowledge, that concept, that understanding. When they ask questions, they can really truly ask in a way that is unbiased. We train it with data. So yes, of course, you can do it with Claude and ChatGPT and Gemini, but we've trained it above that to be able to have a lot more parameters underneath it, with more data points, with more understanding of the market itself beyond what's just there on the website.
Using the remaining time we have, I want to talk about technology, specifically data as well as AI. Now, traditionally, when you think about a platform, when you think of data, you think of having this sort of like pseudo stock market kind of approach, which pretends that you're trading equities and not watches. And it's all about valuations going up and down, the worthwhileness of your portfolio or whatever. I don't know that this is useful to that many people, but I think it's actually just scraping the surface. I think we're getting better and better using statistics and data. Talk a little bit more detail about how SWOP is using AI and data in maybe non-traditional ways. I know you probably have copied some of those things where it's sort of like stock market-esque. I know people like graphs and things like that, but I think that you're not stopping there. So maybe explain a little bit about some of the latest technology, where that creates opportunities and how you're applying it in SWOP.
Yeah, absolutely. So a few years back, the concept of agentic AI systems just weren't really there. They weren't proactive. They were struggling to take action and to really act as an autonomous agent or an autonomous AI. aspect. It was very complicated to train it, very complicated and expensive to teach it. And recently, just a few years ago, that layer really became really unfolded. And that's why this concept of why there's so many agents right now out there is because it's a lot more easier. You have to train it and then it goes and do it for you. Now, yes, of course, not everyone can build an agent, but what we've done and what we're doing is that we're hyper-personalizing an agent that will constantly train based on your personal aspects. So you'll have your own AI broker that we call SWOPy, that as you use, as you browse, as you search, as you negotiate, as you find or go in clubs, we'll be able to train it to become almost an extension of you so that it can start acting better on your behalf, so that at one point, as the technology enhances, you won't even have to go and tell us. We'll be able to just handle everything from you, from the acquiring to the signing and so on and so forth. Now, of course, not in this Terminator concept, but in a way where it's a lot more free, where we can tell you like, hey, look, we know that you've been eyeing this watch for a while. It's finally on the market. We can tell you and say like, oh, great. So that you don't have to be behind browsing all the time and so on and so forth. So the layer of what SWOP really is, it's an agent and a native agent behind everything that really goes and handles and takes action on behalf of the user, from sourcing, going to find leads on those forums of people that said, hey, I'm looking for this watch. We can connect you with your own watch that you've listed, or finding who in your network has a specific watch to buy or to sell so that you can share them in a way that is a lot more efficient and more streamlined. So really, the layer that we've constructed is truly more of the operational and advisory side, by bridging not the data points of pricing and only that's just exactly like you said, just the top layer of adding and things, but really gathering what truly is missing in the market, which is all of the data of someone's actual ownership of a collection. They'll tell us, we'll be able to connect them with the right people that are looking to buy if they ever need to sell it, or helping them with finding their next piece in a way that is transparent without them getting screwed over or without them screwing over someone else on that side. So mitigate in a way that is, again, decentralized and centralized at the same time. I know it's very contradictive at the same time, but we're really trying to find that middle point, that balance between both sides, to make everything work on all sides. That means including the club's creation, the community sides, creating the side for the independent watchmakers to be able to be brought up to the light to people that may have never heard but would love it, or to sell and to support the dealers, to automating their inventories at scale. So yeah, it's really about showing what AI, which is fantastic. There's so many layers around it, but how it can really be implemented on a vertical layer of the watch industry, not just for dealers, but for collectors and for new buyers themselves.
Let's try to make it a little bit less abstract for people who are not technologists, and maybe describe a couple of scenarios or specific things that the AI will be able to do, or maybe you hope it can do, in terms of, recommending certain things or finding certain things. Create a couple of example scenarios that allow listeners to understand how these interesting but perhaps abstract concepts will materialize into specific experiences or potential experiences.
Yeah, absolutely. So what we currently have, for example, is if you take, for example, a picture on WhatsApp and tell he lives, by the way, or it lives on your WhatsApp if you want it to be. And you can just say, hey, look, this is my watch. Go and list it on eBay. Go and list it on Chrono24, Bezel, and so on and so forth. It's going to do this. It's also going to ask you, what are your parameters? What are your pricing? What are you willing to sell? Once it has that knowledge and that context, it's going to handle everything for you. That means when someone goes and negotiates or gives you a lowball offer, it's going to go and counter negotiate on your behalf until the pricing point that you've agreed to has been met. So that's one use case. Then we have the use case as well of finding someone that wants to go and buy it. So if you want to source a watch, you just say, hey, look, SWOPy, I'm looking to buy this watch. This is what I'm willing to spend. I'm based XYZ. And what it's going to do is that it's going to go and scrape what's on the internet, scrape on Facebook group, scrape on Reddit. Scraping is just a method of viewing and seeing what's happening on the internet on a data point. And we're going to find who has what it is that you've told us you were looking for. And it's going to go and speak to them, handle the discussions again, and negotiate. And once they're brought in and they agreed, we're going to bring them to you and say like, hey, this individual, this individual is willing to sell you his watch. Here's the dealer. We've done our background check on him. He's legitimate, and so on and so forth, so that we can simplify the whole process so that you don't have to be behind it and spend more time, hopefully outside in the nature, than trying to be on the phone browsing your next piece and negotiating with people on that side. So, I mean, we have so many use cases that we could go on and on, but primarily we help with automating the whole process of the transaction, the listing, revaluing, the negotiating, the sourcing, but also connecting you with the right timepieces and the right people who want to buy or sell this timepieces. And all of this lives in what we've called the grid, which is our neural liquidity network, to be able to connect dealers, sellers, collectors, buyers, and groups, so that everything lives into one place, visible to everyone, transparent, and everyone has the right data points in an unbiased way on either side.
Final question, which is related to this. How far away are we from truly allowing AI agents to do this for us? And here's what I mean by that. As a buyer, you, or a typical user, not a dealer, you interact with the system by maybe taking some pictures, maybe talking to it, but it builds your profile, populates, your collection database, lets you know about opportunities. Maybe you want to sell something or want to buy something. And then the other end is dealer. They have a similar but different agent that lists things for them, helps manage the day-to-day. I guess what I'm trying to say is most of the dealers or buyers as humans prefer the relationship side and the watch. All this other stuff, the platform, the numbers, the listing, they hate all that. So how far away are we from having the AI agents seamlessly do most of the work on both ends, allowing the humans to just sort of deal with one another and not have to deal with those other things that, again, put up hurdles and prevent transactions from happening? I think you understand the question.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's always going to be more on the personal side. I think it'll depend on what people are comfortable with. I mean, back in the time, people preferred having interactions with that were physically, going instead of texting someone and messaging them, how are you? They would go and show up at the houses and say like, hey, how are you? And do that interaction. Even when messaging and email came, they were still doing it. It took a bit of time to kind of move away from this level until people got comfortable with it and kind of not forced upon, but where it became too simple and too easy for them not to do it, just to text away rather than go and show up or send a written letter on it. So I think we're actually a lot closer to that happening, especially with the younger generation that has already have this trust in technology where they're willing to share anything. I mean, the things that people tell to their AI agents or their AI right now are so personal that they're even more comfortable with sharing them to a human person. And what I saw from some studies, and maybe you can contradict me on that, because again, it's personal thing, but from a study that I saw, people are actually more willing to share more and being more not happy, but more willing to speak to a robot than to a customer agent that is a physical human.
Because humans judge you, but the AI doctor doesn't care what disease you have.
Exactly, and there's that judgment on that side. So there's always that fear of when you're transacting with a yacht, like, oh, I'm scared to potentially lowball them, or I'm scared to even go and purchase or list this. I don't want people to see what I own or something like this. So we can do this, and the agent will do this on the user's behalf in a way where it's not judging, where both agents of each other's extensions will be able to communicate and transact without them having to share anything personal about themselves, just the pieces itself. So again, it'll come into a preference thing, but I think by next year itself, we'll see a huge shift in people transacting through agents themselves, not just for watches, handbags, and jewelry, but for fashion, for collectibles, and so on and so forth. So yeah. The technology is there. The technology is there. I guess it's just at the market to respond to whether to not or not to use it.
Interesting. Something for a follow-up conversation. Riccardo, please tell people where they can learn more about you and SWOP on the internet.
Yeah, absolutely. They can follow us at swop.trade on Instagram. I'm always responsive to the Instagram itself. My handle is also at Riccardo.Dana. And if you want to also check us out, it's www.swop.trade. That is SWOP.TRADE. And you can browse our marketplace. You can have fun with the agent. You can start building it and learning it and do it all for free. Because again, we want to make it a platform that is welcoming to everyone, and build your communities around there where you can benefit as well financially and grow in a way that is friendly, welcoming, and everyone, so that we can keep growing this beautiful industry called watches and making it in a way that is beautiful, fun, and true to why they came to be themselves. So yeah, don't hesitate to reach out.
This has been the Superlative Podcast interview with founder of SWOP, Riccardo Dana. Riccardo, thank you so much.
Thank you, Ariel.